Shalom and welcome again to Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us. As you know, these podcasts are designed to talk about issues related to the explosion of a revolution in longevity that all of us are living through, ourselves, our families, and our community. And as we've talked about here many, many times, and as we've mentioned, it comes up all the time in our workshops that we do as part of our work, the issue of caregiving. And we are very delighted and honored to welcome to today's show Dr. Barry Jacobs, clinical psychologist, family therapist, and the principal for the Health Management Associates, which is a national healthcare consulting firm. Some of you may know Dr. Jacobs more as his regular column out of AARP on some of the issues, or many of the issues that we hope to raise here around caregiving and the implications of caregiving for our generation, and is now, as you know, as many of us know, a multi-generational issue. So, Dr. Jacobs, welcome, Barry. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Really a pleasure and honored to be here.
So let's get right to it. Talk to me about, because you write, as I said, you write about this all the time for AARP. What's going on with this caregiving? There's this tsunami, as many people in the literature call it. It is multi-generational. Talk to me about the implications of this caregiving issue that's now happening in the United States. And my sense is the society as a whole is totally unprepared.
I would say it's mostly unprepared, not totally, but I think your general point is well taken, and that is our population is aging. The United States population right now is about 18% age 65 or older. By 2030, it's going to be up to 20%, and maybe go a little bit higher than that in the ensuing years. And it's going to remain between 20 and say 22% for the next 20, 30 years, from 2030 approximately 2050, 2060, as the baby boom generation kind of moves through that life. And what that has done is placed enormous burden and stress on families, as well as our healthcare system and our social service systems, but more specifically our families, to really make sure that the people, our parents or grandparents, are well cared for. And unfortunately, what I've seen in my career is very often people don't think about those things because they are sometimes unpleasant to think about, thinking about my parents getting older, needing help. And they put off having the conversations that they should be having until an emergency occurs. And then all of a sudden they're knee deep in caregiving issues, and they're not quite sure where to turn.
The statistics for the United States, our community, and this is something that the organized Jewish community, just in my experience in the last couple of years, just don't want to deal with. But if you extrapolate the Pew report of 2020, the Pew Foundation's report on the American Jewish community, at least 50%, half of the contemporary American Jewish community are people over the age of 50. That's a staggering statistic. And if you take somebody who's 52, who may be involved with a parent who's 70, who still may be caring for their parent in their 90s, that's not unusual, as you know. We often talk about in the work we do that, the sandwich generation, we, in our area, because Dr. Jacobs is in Philly, and we're in South Jersey, you go to a good diner, you get a club sandwich. It's multi-level. We call it the club sandwich generator because it's all kinds. The lines go all which way. One of the issues that I needed to ask you about, because we're seeing an increase of this, even in the literature, about so-called solo agers, people who they're not married, they have no children, they have no family. They are really aging by themselves. And when you ask them who's going to take care of you, one of their answers is, I don't know, because the friends that I have are my age, they're also needing care. How do we begin to even address, and this is a growing phenomenon, how do we begin to address this issue?
not easily. So I think about 1 to 4 older adults are solo agers, as you say, and as a society, we haven't figured out a good way to help them. I mean, not everybody has the financial resources to have the kind of housing with supports that they ideally would have. And so there's a lot of fear that folks are going to age in place in a very socially isolated way. We have more research to suggest that social isolation has very bad physical health and mental health effects, but that people, as they age, are not going to have the supports that they need. So municipal government, state government, federal government, everyone's trying to figure this out. But also, Jewish community, other communities are trying to figure this out as well. There's talk about collective housing. There's talk about developing called time banks. Time banks is an idea that taken hold in certain parts of the country. It happens to be in my town, where you spend an hour doing something for somebody. Maybe 5 years from now, when you need help, you get an hour back from somebody else. So it creates more community cohesion. It welds mutual responsibility for one another. So there's lots of ideas out there, but there are no bona fide solutions yet.
Do you see the role of religious faith communities increasing in the area of caregiving for their own members, the people who identify with that community, as the numbers increase and the resources perhaps don't keep up with that increase? Is there a real role for faith communities?
I believe there is, and I think in several respects. So I think that certainly most rabbis, most chaplains are very familiar with talking with their congregants about elder care in particular. But I also think that faith communities can provide other hands-on supports for caregivers and for people who are aging. And that may mean setting up caregiver support groups for the emotional support, but also setting up home meal delivery, helping folks with home modifications so that they can remain in their homes, helping them with home monitoring, calling someone every day, helping with socialization. I think faith communities can play an essential role, and in some ways a more important role than any government program is set up, because faith communities often consist of people who've been in the congregation for a long time, who know one another. It's a higher level of trust, and where there's just faith in and of itself is a resource that they can draw upon in dealing with some of the adversity that may come along with aging, illness, and disability. So I absolutely agree with you. I believe all faith communities should be thinking of this.
Yeah, and I know there's a trend in some aspects of these communities, even in the Jewish community, to really begin to raise this issue, and how through care and community programs, as we call them, provide training for the growing numbers of people who are seeking to age in place. And because of the mobility factor, as you know, and you've written about it, not everybody has their children, and if they have children living within a couple of miles of it, it's not unusual that they're thousands of miles away. And so the caregiving aspect in long distance caregiving becomes extremely challenging, as you know. The aging in place phenomenon, we've talked to people who run nursing homes and CCRCs, and they've told us that the entry age of people now is a decade later than it was years ago. We spoke to somebody a couple of months ago on one of the podcasts, and they say, yes, the average person coming into our CCRC are even independents are in their 80s, as opposed to a while ago in their late 50s to 60s. The aging in place, one of the challenges is taking a house and making it fall proof, FALL. And I know AARP has resources, correct? About how to fall.
AARP has a very wide range of information dealing with all aspects of aging in place, including how to modify your home to make it a safer place to live.
Okay, talk to us a little bit about that, because that frightens a lot of people because they know somebody who fell and everything changed.
So there are some basic modifications that people think about to make their home, I wouldn't say fail-proof because, there's no guarantees here, but to make it less likely that they're going to fall. So the most important one is probably, the two most important ones. One is having a ramp up the front stairs, which costs a couple $1,000s. And there's often zoning regulations and other things which affect that. So you need to find someone to help you with that, oftentimes to get it done. But then dealing with stairs within the home, and many parts of this country have predominantly multi-story homes, and someone who is shaky on their feet, maybe they have neuropathy from diabetes, or maybe they've had a knee replacement and their knees weak. They shouldn't be going up and down the stairs. They want to have what's called a stair glide, which is literally a little attachment to the banister where you sit on it and it glides you up to the top of the stairs and decreases the likelihood that you're going to fall down the stairs dramatically. I've seen people who are very interested in ramps and home, and stair glides, who are interested in putting grab bars into the shower because the bathroom is often where falls occur, and then you fall on the hard surfaces of the bathroom and you get seriously injured. So I've seen people who want those things and can't afford them. I've seen people who want those things but don't know how to go about getting them. I've also seen people who feel like they love their home just the way it is. They want it to remain immaculate. They don't want a stair glide marring the aesthetic of the home. And so they resist it for that reason. And I've seen some of them go so far as to, they'd rather go down on the stairs on their duff, literally on their duff, one stair at a time, than put a stair glide in. So I would say to folks, number one, if you can afford it and you're amenable to it, to find single floor living as you get into your 70s, it's probably a good idea for all of us to think about that. But if you're intent on remaining in your home, then to really seriously look at all the things that your home may need to make it a safer place. Other simple things, you get rid of get rid of throw rugs, right? Throw rugs, people can slip on them very easily. You get rid of kind of low furniture, coffee tables that you could trip over. So you have to be willing to be a little bit flexible with the interior of your home to just make it more conducive for aging in place.
What, Barry? What about lighting?
Another essential ingredient of a safer home, because all of us, myself included, we're all wearing these things, and the more light we have in a room, the less likely we are to fall. So, brighter lights, more lights, oftentimes essential, and that also includes, not just the main rooms, but the basements and other places, the garage, places we may not think of putting more lighting. More lights throughout the house. The other thing which people are using is they're using Alexa and Google as ways of monitoring. Not just saying to Alexa, please play me, the Beatles' Twist and Shout, right? But it's to say to Alexa, please call my son and tell him that I'm having some difficulty today and having more pain. And so using the electronics at the home also as part of a larger safety system.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'd like to ask you a follow-up on that. A couple of years ago, I was part of a conference at Arizona State University and their Jewish Studies department that was focusing on artificial intelligence and caregiving. And I gave a talk on robotics and did some research about this. And we actually interviewed the woman from Karen Etkin, who's in charge of one of these. You know her?
I see her on social media. She's quite the AI expert.
Yes. So she has this book, which is in the shelf up there. And I was amazed at the amount of robotics that are being created I don't know what you would call it, to artificial caregivers, but along the lines of what you're talking about, everything from a little, pet dog that's behind me here that, you can use as like a support, but actual machines that will communicate to my children who are 1,000 miles away, video reminding about medication, but also to have a conversation with because of the loneliness and the isolation. This is really a wave of the future, isn't it?
I think it's a wave that's already started cresting. I think there are more homes that are being built with some of these things built into them. That includes not just ways of communicating easily by just using voice activated communication, but also having remote monitoring in the home so that you can easily have your blood pressure taken, your heart rate taken, respiratory rate taken, and that those vital signs are then transmitted to family members or even to your healthcare system. So there's a lot of things that people are doing to retrofit the home with technology to, again, make it a safer place, the one that you can really thrive in as you get older.
So a practical question is, somebody's listening or watching this and say, I think I'd like to pursue this. Where does one go to get more information about that? AARP or where else?
Yeah. So AARP has a very extensive set of articles about technologies that you can look at. Where else? I'm not sure. This is not an area of great expertise for me. But what I would say is there are new products coming on the market all the time. I think if you went to Best Buy, some electronics store, there would be things that are available that you wouldn't even imagine being available 5 or 10 years ago about home monitoring systems. Is what a lot of this goes on here. And so I do think that a lot of those technologies are becoming available, and then with the addition of AI, I can only imagine how much more sophisticated this may be in times to come. So it'll help the solo agers. It'll help the long distance caregiver who's worried about their parents, wants to make sure they got up this morning, wants to make sure that they ate this morning, wants to make sure that they actually are they're not wearing mismatched socks today. I mean, anything you can think of, but the technology will help monitor how someone who's older is doing and also convey that information to people who really can benefit from having it.
So we're speaking with Dr. Barry Jacobs, a clinical psychologist, family therapist, and principal for Health Management Associates, on this whole explosion of caregiving and some of the resources that are available. And we're going to be right back with Barry right after these messages.
For 20 years, the Lubetkin media companies have been producing award-winning audio and video programs. We produce audio podcasts, documentaries, seminar panels, conference speaker videos, tribute videos, and family legacy videos. And of course, the Seekers of Meaning TV show and podcast for Rabbi Richard Address and JewishSacredAging.com. I'm Steve Lubetkin, and I'd love to invite you to explore the ways that we can tell your story in sound and images. Please visit our website at beingthemedia.com, where you'll see examples of our work for other clients. And if you'd like more information, please email steve@beingthemedia.com. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you out there on the net. Take good care.
Welcome back. Welcome back to today's edition of Seekers of Meaning. We're here with Dr. Barry Jacobs, talking about his expertise in the issue of caregiving. As many of you know, and as he's mentioned, he writes for AARP and is involved in family practice and also as a principal for the Health Management Associates, a national healthcare consulting firm. Family caregiving. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned this before we started, that you and your wife just completed a book, which should be out, you said, hopefully by springtime.
Yeah. So actually, this will be my third book on family caregiving. So I have one called The Emotional Survival Guide for Caregivers that came out in 2006. My wife and I wrote an AARP branded book called Meditations for Caregivers that came out in 2020. And now this third book it doesn't have a title as yet, but it's basically answers to 150 most common questions that caregivers ask, particularly new caregivers, and it will cover everything from the emotional side of it, but also finances, housing, dealing with healthcare professionals. It'll be a range of issues in a question and answer form. And with any luck, it isn't also an AARP branded book that's going to be published by Guilford. With any luck, it'll be out in the late spring.
So in your work, in your writing, in your practice, you deal with families who are entering this, what I call this tunnel of caregiving, can be totally overwhelming. How do we begin to broach the conversation of what may be happening as a family enters this, what is really now, I'm convinced it is a new stage of life. Caregiving is a stage of life now. How do we begin to approach this?
So there are a couple, obviously different pathways in. So one pathway is, your parents are getting older, you notice they're slowing down, they're not driving at night anymore, maybe they're not mowing the lawn so much, maybe the house is a little dirtier than it was, and you begin kind of picking up for them. And so gradually, and in almost an insidious way, you take on more and more tasks for them, and initially you don't even realize that you're becoming their caregiver gradually, but you are. And hopefully along the way, you've been having conversations with your parents about a number of things to prepare for getting older and not functioning as well in the future as they are currently. So you're talking with them about maybe where they should live, or they want to modify the house, or whether they should be driving anymore, or whether they're getting all the health care that they need. There's just a whole host of issues that adult children sometimes shy away from discussing with parents because they don't want to offend their parents. They don't want the parents to get upset with them. But in fact, it's really important preparation for thinking into the future about what ought to be done. And what I always say to adult children in this instance is you're helping your parents live the way they want to live by having conversations with them about exactly that, asking your parents, 5 years from now, where do you want to be living, and how do you want to be living? 10 years from now, how do you want to be living? And then talking about what they may need in order to live that way. And that as their adult child, as their supporter and advocate, how do you help them live that way? So sometimes adult children are afraid that the parents are thinking that they're trying to take over their parents' lives. But if the adult children could say, hey, I want you to live the way you want to live. I just want to make sure you can do it safely. Let's figure that out together, and let's work on that together. All that works out much better if there's an ongoing conversation.
And those conversations need to start way before, when, for want of a better term, when everybody's reasonably healthy, correct?
Correct. That's probably the exception to the rule. Most people wind up doing this when a parent has a new diagnosis. They've been diagnosed they've had a heart attack, or they've been diagnosed with diabetes, or they have a hospitalization after a fall. And then suddenly everybody wakes up to this idea, they're not going to live forever exactly the way they've been, hale and hearty, or they have they have an automobile accident. So yes, those conversations should take place sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult.
I get it. My kids, I'm 66 now. My kids, when I start having these conversations with me, because that's how I taught them, right? And I'm not all that eager to have these conversations either.
It's having walked this walk, I also with my own, there was a lot of denial. Like, it's, everything's going to be okay. You're going to live forever. But the reality is, the reality. So, how important is it in the caregiving journey? Because I've had two very recent conversations with families who are in the process, in this life stage. How important is it to try to acquire and have a relationship and consulting with a good elder care attorney?
I think it's an excellent thing to do if you can afford it. And so what does an elder care attorney do? It's an elder law attorney. What they do is they help with a living will and a will. Living will being often called an advance directive, but basically helping people put in a legal document what their wishes are in the event that they're incapacitated, unable to speak for themselves. They often, if someone needs to move out of a home and go into a nursing home, and most people in nursing homes in this country go in under Medicaid, about 70% going into Medicaid, but to get on Medicaid after you maybe lived in a middle class community, live a middle class lifestyle, is not so easy, and so the elder law attorney will help with what they call the spend down to get on Medicaid, to enable you to go into a nursing home and have it paid for. And then the elder law attorney often will deal with trust issues, other things regarding inheritance that to try to prevent theirs from being family dissension later on. So I got my mother and stepfather to use elder law attorney. I use an elder law attorney myself. I think it's a very wise decision to do that.
One of the phrases you just used, a quote, "if you can afford it," unquote. We've got to talk about the money. There was another recent, almost weekly, there are articles in papers and whatever, just about the inequality of access to healthcare, quality healthcare in the United States, allegedly the richest country in the world. You consult in this area. You've written in this area. You're writing books in this area. How in the world do we begin to address, and there's an election coming up where, interestingly enough, this issue has not risen to the top, but that's another podcast for another time. How do we begin to address this inequality in access and the cost of healthcare?
Well, you're throwing me a lot of softballs here right now. This is a very, very hard question. I'll just give you my own opinion.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, my own opinion is that we have to set a floor, social service, a safety net, and we have to fund that. And when we have a safety net of sorts in place, but it has a lot of holes in it. All right, it's not well resourced because it costs money, and people are reluctant to pay taxes to pay for that floor of services. But in my opinion, there should be access not just to healthcare and housing, but also to long-term services and supports, the kind of services that people need as they age, and that may include access to home modifications, have someone else pay for home modifications, have the county pay for home modifications, have home health aides come into the home in order to provide assistance with showering, and so other countries have this a much stronger floor for services. I'm thinking about places like Japan or Germany or Sweden, and we don't have the level of services that's really necessary to enable people to live reasonably well as they age. And so, but to address the inequities, we have to, there's always going to be people in this country who are going to have much greater wealth and have much more privilege and many more options. But everyone should be guaranteed a certain floor of services. Right?
It's interesting because when you study this through the Jewish text, this is part of some of the stuff we teach. There are texts which basically say and have been interpreted that the society has a responsibility to provide that which people lack, L-A-C-K, and healthcare. If you get sick, you're missing that. It's been lost. And then the question in like some of the commentaries is, does the society have the responsibility to provide and return that which is lost or which you're lacking? And then there's a huge mood within our tradition of saying, yes, it does, which would go along with what you're saying, that the society has an obligation to provide that floor, that minimum floor to everybody.
I believe it does. So what happens when we have a system or systems that don't have that floor or have a faulty floor? That is people are unable to stay in their homes, and then they go into facilities where they don't really want to go, and the cost for those comes out of public funds anyway, because it comes out of Medicaid, and that's paid for by all of us. Or they wind up in hospitals and, some Medicaid for some sort of public health service that is not good, not necessarily the best healthcare in the world, but also, again, comes out of the cost, out of all of the pockets over our tax money goes to that. So to me, it's a matter of, if we spend the money to provide people with a floor, give them a better way to live, and more likely to live as a lot in community, then we're not going to pay later if they wind up in a hospital or some sort of institution.
Yeah, it would seem to me, as you're saying this, if you step back to 30,000 feet, we're paying for this one way or another.
That's correct.
But there's still, the system seems to, and for example, the gradual trends is exploding of dementia and Alzheimer's, and the care for that and how much that costs, and people having to bring in home health care workers and et cetera, et cetera. And again, the society doesn't seem to be prepared for what is happening in just this one little area of dementia and Alzheimer's, which is a huge caregiving challenge. Huge.
It's the biggest caregiving challenge. It's the most expensive health issue to our country for all the reasons you just stated. And we, as a society, we don't like to think about the dementia. We don't like to deal with dementia. We're making some medical advances on dementia, but it's not going to be any breakthrough drug that's going to cure dementia in the near term. And so, as a society, we've got to support people who are having cognitive impairments. It's very expensive, and so there is a lot of thought about that now. There's a lot of programs, a lot of people trying to figure out how to do this, but most Americans do not want to think about dementia, right? It's one of these bummer topics. They don't want to think about their parents getting dementia, and they don't want to they have tremendous fears about themselves getting dementia.
Oh yeah, sure.
And so it's a topic that most of us push out of mind.
Barry, is there any, because I don't know of any, and maybe through AARP you do know, or through the health management, is there any type of curriculum or on caregiving that people could go online and say, well, here's a 6-part series of caregiving issues and how to do this, and then you can fill in your particular location or faith community and what that has to say. But this is if you're entering this life stage here, this could be your book, but I could go online and do this. Is there any type of caregiving curriculum?
There's a lot of material out there, not just books. And yes, my newest book will cover a lot of this, but there's a lot of videos, and that seems to be a way people really enjoy learning now. So short instructional videos on all manner of topics, how to manage medications, how to give somebody a shower, real practical things. So AARP has a whole video series for caregivers. There's a national caregiver support organization called Caregiver Action Network that has a whole series of videos. UCLA has a whole series of videos. So that there are resources out there. A lot of times, it's not that there's a lack of information, but that people don't know how to access it or that it even exists. But there is information out there that will provide people with a map forward and with some specific skills to do what they want to do. And that is, they want to help your family member as best they can. They want to do a good job. They want to do the right thing. They don't want, and there are many people, because they don't know this, they don't have the skills. They don't know exactly what's expected of them. They're very afraid of failing. They're afraid of having somebody fall on their watch, getting really seriously hurt, living with a guilt. So, one of the first things I say to caregivers that I work with in psychotherapy is, let's get information. Let's make you as well educated about this as you can, because education is power, knowledge is power.
Yeah, and from our ballpark, the psycho-spiritual challenges and tolls in caregiving are overwhelming. And they're also, as we've talked about in some sessions, there are some very, very powerful, wonderful blessings that take place in the context of this life stage of caregiving. Estrangements disappear, new realities, relationships. And I think we need to talk a little bit about, as a society, some of the, not benefits, but there are opportunities for blessing, let me put it in religious language, that also take place. And I would imagine that if we were able to line up a whole series of clergy people from all different denominations and say, have you been part of some of these moments? Almost every clergy person is going to say, yeah, I didn't expect it, but this is what happened. Before we run out of time, as an expert in this, and again, thank you very, very much for all the stuff that you do. It's as we say, a major mitzvah.
I'll take that as high praise.
No, it is. It's meant that way. What piece of advice, the new year is dawning. What's the one piece of advice that you would give to somebody right now who's entering this life stage of caregiver?
So I'll give you two pieces of advice. So
yeah.
The first piece of advice would be along the lines of what we've been talking about during this whole program, is to step into this new world with your eyes open, willing to learn, and that nobody knows everything they need to know at the beginning. Most people, the best that they do at the beginning is muddle through, but through muddling, they learn more. They get better at this. And oftentimes after people have been doing this for a while, they gain a real sense of mastery and even pride. And so to not shy away from this is a very important thing for all of us to do. It is a mitzvah. Yeah. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, what I often see is people doubt themselves. They doubt that they can do this. And and so, in accordance with the first point I made, they have to believe that if they fail at the beginning, they won't fail forever. That they'll get better at this. The third thing I'll say, I just throw one more thing in there, and that is, if this is, for most of us, a marathon, not a sprint, you got to pace yourself. You have to replenish yourself along the way, and that's how you make it from beginning to end. And that's how at the end of the day, you were able to look back and said, this was really hard, but I did the best that I could, and I'm very glad to have done this.
Dr. Barry Jacobs, thank you very, very much. Much to discuss, much more. Good luck with the book. Hopefully you'll come back when that book comes out and walk us through those questions and answers, because the need will continue to be there. Just take care of yourself, stay healthy, and thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. To all of you, thank you for your time and for joining us today on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. Again, if you'd like to make a comment or contact us, please email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. If you'd like to support our work, please go to the website, jewishsacredaging.com. You'll find a very conveniently located donate button. Just click on that, follow the prompts. It's really, really easy, and we are very grateful. Likewise, if you'd like to become a sponsor of some of these podcasts, just also email me at that same email address. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the broadcast centers of Lubetkin Media in beautiful Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and a big shout out to our producer, Steve Lubetkin. Again, thank you for joining us. We are very appreciative of your time. Keep in touch. And until we see each other again on the next Seekers of Meaning, take care, stay healthy, be kind to yourself, be kind to everyone else. Todah, shalom.